In a galaxy where dragons ruled the stars for 10,000 years, where their crystalline scales could deflect plasma cannons and their breath could melt starship hulls, there existed one universal truth: dragons were dying, and no force in the universe could save them. The Draconic Empire stretched across 73 star systems, their majestic ships shaped like their earthbound ancestors, breathing solar fire as they patrolled the cosmic lanes. But, for the past century, a mysterious plague had been consuming their race from within, a cellular decay that turned their magnificent scales to ash and their fire to smoke. The greatest healers, the most advanced medical technology, even forbidden dark arts from the void between stars, nothing could halt the inexorable march toward extinction. Dragon after dragon fell to the withering disease, their deaths marking the slow twilight of an age. Until a grease-stained human mechanic named Jake Thompson, working in the depths of a frontier space station, accidentally brushed his calloused hand against the dying Princess Zephyra's scales. And everything the galaxy thought it knew about life, death, and the power hidden within ordinary humans changed forever. What Jake didn't know was that his touch would not only save a dying princess, but ignite a revolution that would reshape the balance of power across the stars. What the dragons didn't know was that humanity carried within their DNA something far more valuable than any precious metal or energy source in the galaxy. What none of them knew was that this single moment of accidental contact would transform a humble mechanic into the most hunted and most precious being in the universe. This is the story of how one man's compassion became a weapon, how a dying empire found salvation in the most unlikely place, and how humanity discovered that sometimes the greatest power isn't found in technology or might, but in the simple act of reaching out to help another living being. The galaxy will never be the same. Jake Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his work glove, leaving a streak of engine grease across his skin. The repair bay of Frontier Station Echo 7 hummed with the constant thrum of recycling systems and the occasional hiss of hydraulic lifts. It wasn't glamorous work, fixing the countless small craft that passed through this remote outpost on the edge of known space, but it paid the bills and kept him far from the politics of the inner worlds. The station itself was a modest affair, a collection of rotating cylinders connected by access tubes, spinning lazily against the backdrop of the Helix Nebula. Most travelers barely noticed Echo 7 as they passed through the jump gate, heading to more important destinations. It was exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear and work in peace. Jake was elbow deep in the engine compartment of a cargo hauler when the alert klaxons began their urgent wail. Red lights flashed throughout the bay as the station's AI announced in its perpetually calm voice, "Attention all personnel. Emergency docking request from Draconic Imperial vessel. All non-essential personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." He paused, wrench still in hand. Dragons didn't come to places like Echo 7. The proud reptilian race that ruled most of the galaxy had their own magnificent shipyards and repair facilities. Their vessels were works of art as much as engineering marvels, living metal shaped to resemble their creators, breathing plasma fire from ornate dragonhead prows, hulls that gleamed like scales in the light of distant stars. Through the transparent aluminum viewport of the repair bay, Jake watched as something impossible approached the station. The ship was clearly of draconic design, but it moved wrong. Instead of the graceful, predatory glide that characterized their vessels, this one limped through space, its hull dimmed and scarred. Sections of the living metal appeared diseased, showing the telltale gray discoloration that spoke of the plague ravaging the Draconic Empire. Station Commander Martinez's voice crackled over the comm system. "Thompson, you still in Bay 7? I need you to prep for an emergency repair. And, Jake, this one's classified. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, it stays here. Understood?" "Understood, Commander," Jake replied, though his stomach tightened with unease. Classified work usually meant complications he didn't want in his simple life. The Draconic vessel settled into the bay with a sound like a dying whale, metal groaning and systems failing. As the docking clamps engaged and atmospheric integrity was established, Jake got his first close look at the ship. It was smaller than most Draconic cruisers, possibly a personal yacht or diplomatic vessel. The living metal hull was shot through with veins of black corruption, and several sections had clearly been jury-rigged with non-Draconic components. When the airlock cycled open, Jake expected to see the usual Draconic delegation, proud warriors in ceremonial armor, perhaps a noble or merchant prince flanked by guards. Instead, three figures emerged, and even in his limited experience with dragonkind, he could see their desperation. The first was clearly a guardian, nearly 7 feet tall with scales the color of burnished copper. But, where draconic warriors typically stood with perfect military bearing, this one moved with the careful gait of someone fighting constant pain. The gray patches of scale rot were visible even through his armor. The second figure was older, wearing robes that had once been magnificent but now appeared travel-worn and hastily repaired. Royal insignia marked him as nobility, but his movements carried the weight of exhaustion and grief. When he turned his great reptilian head toward the ship's interior, Jake saw something in his golden eyes that he'd never expected to see in a dragon: fear. "Carefully now," the noble said, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked highborn dragons. "Every moment is precious." That's when Jake saw her. The third figure was carried on a hover stretcher that hummed quietly as it glided forward. Even unconscious, she was clearly the most beautiful dragon Jake had ever seen. Her scales were the color of sapphires caught in starlight, though half of them had been consumed by the gray death that was slowly killing her race. Delicate features marked her as female, and the crown of small horns that graced her head indicated royal blood. She couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 25 in human years. But it was her condition that made Jake's breath catch. The scale rot hadn't just touched her, it was consuming her. Gray death spread across nearly 60% of her body, and even as he watched, he could see it advancing, turning living scale to ash. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and each exhale seemed weaker than the last. "How long does she have?" Commander Martinez asked quietly as he approached the group. The older dragon's composure cracked. "Hours. Perhaps less. We've tried everything, the finest healers in the Empire, technology from the ancient vaults, even desperate treatments from the Outer Rim. Nothing slows the progression. We came here because..." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because this is where hope comes to die. If we must lose her, at least it will be far from the eyes of the court." Jake found himself stepping forward without thinking. "What's wrong with her? I mean, beyond the obvious." The guardian tensed, hand moving instinctively to his weapon, but the older dragon raised a restraining gesture. "And you are?" "Jake Thompson. I'm the mechanic here. Look, I don't know much about dragon biology, but I've worked on your people's ships. Sometimes the problems aren't what they seem to be." The noble studied him for a long moment. "I am Duke Aldrich Stormwind, and this is my daughter, Princess Sephira. The plague that kills our people defies understanding. It attacks the very essence of what makes us dragon. Our scales lose their connection to our life force, becoming dead matter that spreads corruption through our bodies. No treatment has ever been successful." Jake looked at the princess again, noting details that his mechanical training had taught him to observe. "The progression, is it uniform? I mean, does it spread at the same rate across all individuals?" "No," the Duke replied, a hint of curiosity entering his voice. "Some succumb in days, others fight for months. My daughter has endured for 6 weeks, longer than most." "And you said it attacks the connection between scales and life force?" Jake stepped closer to the stretcher, studying the pattern of decay. "That sounds almost like a systems integration failure. In ship systems, when the living metal loses connection to the ship's consciousness, you get exactly this kind of cascading failure." The guardian growled low in his throat. "Our princess is not a machine, human." "No, but maybe the principle is similar." Jake looked at Duke Aldrich. "What if it's not really a disease? What if it's more like a frequency disruption? Your scales are resonant with your life energy, right? What if something is jamming that signal?" Duke Aldrich's eyes widened. "The human has an interesting perspective, Captain. Perhaps fresh eyes see what ours have missed." Jake found himself reaching toward the princess before he consciously decided to do so. Something about her condition reminded him of a ship he'd worked on last month, a draconic courier whose living metal had been slowly dying because of quantum interference from damaged navigation crystals. He'd fixed it by re-establishing the harmonic resonance between the ship's consciousness and its physical form. "May I?" he asked, hand hovering over the princess's arm. The guardian stepped forward. "Absolutely not. No alien hands will touch." "Let him," the Duke said quietly. "What harm can it do now?" She's dying regardless. Jake gently placed his palm against the princess's forearm, where living scales met dead gray corruption. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, like touching warm metal that somehow pulsed with life. But, more than that, he felt something else. A wrongness, like static in a radio signal or interference in a quantum field. He closed his eyes and did what he always did when diagnosing a complex system failure: he listened. Not with his ears, but with the intuitive understanding that had made him one of the best mechanics in this sector. And there, beneath the surface, he heard it, a discordant frequency, like a signal being jammed. Without conscious thought, Jake began to hum. It was a simple tune, something he often hummed while working. But, as the sound resonated through his chest and into his hand, something extraordinary happened. The gray corruption under his palm flickered. Princess Zephyra's breathing deepened. The decay stopped spreading. Duke Aldrich gasped, his massive form trembling. Impossible. Jake opened his eyes and saw that where his hand touched the princess, the gray death was retreating. Healthy blue scales were emerging from beneath the corruption like flowers blooming in fast forward. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The princess was healing. "What are you?" the guardian whispered, his weapon forgotten. Jake stared at his own hand in shock. I don't know. I'm just a mechanic." But, even as he said the words, he realized they weren't entirely true anymore. Whatever had just happened, whatever he had just done, had changed everything. The princess stirred on her stretcher, her breathing growing stronger by the moment. Color was returning to her scales, and the patches of death continued to retreat wherever his touch lingered. Duke Aldrich fell to one knee, a gesture of respect that Jake had never seen a dragon make to any non-dragon. "Human, you have just performed a miracle that our greatest healers deemed impossible. You have touched the divine essence of dragonkind and restored what was lost." Jake pulled his hand back, suddenly, afraid of what he was capable of. "I don't understand what happened." "Neither do we," Duke Aldrich admitted, rising to his feet. "But my daughter lives, and that is all that matters at this moment. Captain Thuras, send word to the Imperial Palace immediately. Tell them." He paused, studying Jake with new intensity. "Tell them we may have found the answer to our prayers." Princess Zephyra's eyes fluttered open, brilliant gold, like captured sunlight. They fixed on Jake's face with an intelligence and awareness that made him forget how to breathe. "You," she whispered in a voice like wind chimes. "You brought me back." Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. "Who are you?" she asked. "Nobody special," Jake replied. "Just someone who wanted to help." Princess Zephyra smiled, and Jake realized that his simple life on the frontier was over. Whatever he had just awakened within himself, whatever power had flowed through his human hands to heal a dying dragon, it would not remain secret for long. And, in a galaxy where dragons ruled through strength and ancient tradition, being the human who could heal the plague that was killing them would make him either the most valuable person alive or the most dangerous. As if reading his thoughts, Duke Aldrich approached. "Jake Thompson, you have just changed the course of history. The question now is whether you're prepared for what that means." Jake looked at the princess, now sitting up on her stretcher as health continued to return to her magnificent form, then, at the Duke and Captain who watched him with a mixture of awe and calculation. Through the viewport, he could see other ships beginning to appear. Word was already spreading. "I guess I'm about to find out," he said. And, somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that his quiet life as a frontier mechanic was the least of what he was about to lose. The communication burst from Frontier Station Echo 7 reached the draconic Imperial Palace on Drakras Prime in less than 6 hours. What followed was chaos unlike anything the ancient empire had seen in its 10,000-year history. Emperor Scorvanus Rex, Lord of the Flame Eternal and Master of 73 Worlds, was in his private chambers when the message arrived. The great dragon had ruled for 8 centuries, his scales once the color of molten gold, his fire capable of melting starship hulls at 1,000 meters. But, the plague had not spared even the emperor. Gray patches marred his magnificent hide, and his flame burned dimmer each day. He read the message 3 times before summoning his council. "A human," he said to the assembled nobles and military commanders, his voice carrying both disbelief and desperate hope. A human mechanic has reversed the scale rot in Princess Zephyra. The council chamber erupted. Dragons who had maintained perfect composure while watching their civilization slowly die suddenly found their voices. Admiral Pyraxis, supreme commander of the Imperial fleet, slammed his massive fist on the crystalline conference table. Impossible. No alien species has ever demonstrated healing abilities beyond basic medicine. The humans especially are known for their crude technology and short lifespans. And, yet, interjected Duchess Embria, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, my sources confirm that Princess Zephyra was indeed dying 6 hours ago, and is now not only alive but recovering. The Grey Death that covered 60% of her body has been reduced to less than 20% and continues to retreat. Chancellor Dracos, oldest of the council members, raised a withered claw for silence. My Emperor, if this report is accurate, we face a situation that changes everything. For the first time in a century, someone has not merely slowed the plague, they have reversed it. Emperor Scorvanus stood, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. Despite the plague's ravages, he remained an imposing figure. What do we know of this human? Jake Thompson, Red Intelligence Minister Nexus from her datapad. Age 32 standard years. Born on the human colony world of New Aberdeen. Parents deceased, killed in a mining accident when he was 16. No siblings, no spouse, no children. Served briefly in the Human Colonial Defense Force as an engineer before being dishonorably discharged for insubordination. Insubordination, the Emperor inquired. He refused a direct order to abandon civilian evacuations during the Rigel Station disaster 4 years ago. Saved over 3,000 lives but was court-martialed for disobedience. Since then, he's worked as a freelance mechanic on frontier stations. Admiral Pyraxis snorted. A disgraced human soldier with no family ties and a record of defying authority. How wonderfully convenient. Convenient for whom? Asked the Emperor. For anyone seeking to manipulate him, the Admiral replied. My lord, this could be an elaborate ruse. The humans have been pushing for better trade agreements for decades. What better way to gain leverage than to suddenly produce a cure for our plague? Duchess Embria shook her head. You give the humans too much credit, Pyraxis. Their biotechnology is primitive compared to ours. They couldn't fake something like this. Then, how do you explain it? Demanded the Admiral. Chancellor Dracos cleared his throat. Perhaps, my friends, we should consider that the universe still holds mysteries we have not fathomed. Our ancestors spoke of the old magic, the forces that existed before technology, before empires. What if this human has touched something ancient? The chamber fell silent. Dragons were a proud, scientific race, but they also remembered their roots in fire and mystery. Regardless of the explanation, the Emperor said finally, we must act. If this human truly possesses the ability to heal our people, he becomes the most valuable individual in the galaxy. Admiral Pyraxis, I want a battle group dispatched to Echo 7 immediately. To retrieve the human? To protect him. And, Chancellor Dracos, contact every major power in the galaxy. Inform them that any attempt to interfere with or harm Jake Thompson will be considered an act of war against the Draconic Empire. Meanwhile, aboard the cargo freighter Heavy Lifter, 3 systems away from Echo 7, Captain Sarah Chen received a priority message that made her nearly drop her coffee. Medical emergency, she read aloud to her crew. Requesting immediate transport for human mechanic capable of treating draconic scale rot? Medical priority Alpha 1? Her navigator, a young man named Peters, looked up from his station. Captain, that's impossible. Alpha 1 is reserved for galaxy-threatening pandemics or planetary disasters. I know what Alpha 1 means, Chen snapped, but her mind was racing. She'd served 20 years in the Human Colonial Medical Corps before taking to the merchant lanes. Alpha 1 emergencies were no joke, and they came with massive bounties for anyone who responded. She activated the ship's intercom. All hands, we have a priority medical transport mission. Plot a course for Frontier Station Echo 7, maximum burn. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Word of the healing had leaked beyond official channels, and, suddenly, every intelligence service, medical organization, and treasure hunter in known space was converging on a forgotten frontier station that most people couldn't find on a star chart. Back on Echo 7, Jake was discovering that being the center of galactic attention was far more terrifying than he'd imagined. "How many ships?" he asked Commander Martinez for the fourth time in 2 hours. 47 at last count, and more arriving every hour, Martinez replied grimly. "We've got Draconic battlecruisers, human medical frigates, Centauri research vessels, even a few ships I can't identify. Hell, there's a Void Runner stealth ship out there somewhere. My sensors keep getting phantom readings." Jake sat in the station's small medical bay, watching Princess Zephyra sleep. Her recovery continued at a phenomenal rate. The Grey Death had retreated to small patches on her shoulders and legs, and even those were shrinking visibly. Her breathing was strong and steady, her color had returned to its full magnificent blue, and she'd even managed to eat some of the specialized nutrients that Duke Aldrich had brought. "She's beautiful," commented Dr. Lisa Park, the station's chief medical officer. The middle-aged woman had been running scans on both Jake and the princess for hours. "I've never seen draconic physiology this close before. Their biology is incredibly complex, part organic, part crystalline, part something I don't have words for." "Any idea how I healed her?" Jake asked. Dr. Park shook her head. "I've run every test I can think of. Your bioelectric field is slightly elevated, but nothing that should account for miraculous healing abilities. Your DNA is completely normal human baseline. Blood chemistry is unremarkable. By every measure I have, you're exactly what you appear to be, a healthy human male with slightly elevated stress hormones." "Gee, I wonder why my stress hormones are elevated," Jake muttered. Duke Aldrich approached from his vigil beside his daughter's bed. The dragon noble had barely left her side since the healing, and Jake could see the mixture of gratitude and calculation in his golden eyes. "Jake Thompson," the Duke said formally, "my daughter's recovery continues to exceed our most optimistic projections. Within another day, she will be completely healed. You have performed a miracle that our greatest healers could not accomplish." "I still don't understand how," Jake replied. "I just touched her and hummed. It felt right, somehow. Like tuning an engine until it runs smoothly." "Perhaps that is exactly what you did," suggested a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Princess Zephyra sitting up in her medical bed, looking alert and healthy despite her ordeal. Her voice was stronger now, carrying the harmonic undertones of dragon nobility. "Daughter!" Duke Aldrich rushed to her side. "You should rest. You've been through a terrible trauma." "I feel wonderful," she said, smiling at her father before turning her attention to Jake. "And I believe I understand what happened, at least partially." Jake approached the bed cautiously. "What do you mean?" "Dragons are beings of harmony," the princess explained. "Our scales, our fire, our very life force operates on specific frequencies. The plague disrupts those frequencies, creates discord where there should be resonance. When you touched me, I felt something I'd never experienced before." "What?" "Perfect harmony. Your bioelectric field, your neural patterns, even your breathing, everything was in sync with my natural frequency. It was as if you became a tuning fork for my life force, helping it find its proper resonance again." Dr. Park leaned forward intently. "Are you saying Jake can somehow match draconic biofrequencies?" "Not match," Princess Zephyra corrected. "Harmonize. There's a difference. Matching would require changing himself to fit our patterns. Harmonizing means finding the underlying rhythm that connects all living things and helping damaged systems remember their proper song." Jake stared at his hands. "I've always been good with engines, with understanding how complex systems work. But this is the same principle," the princess said gently. "Life is the most complex system of all." Commander Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel, we have incoming priority transmission from the Draconic Imperial Palace. Also, the Human Colonial Authority has just declared this station to be under emergency medical protection protocols." Duke Aldrich sighed. "And so it begins. Jake Thompson, you are about to become the most sought-after individual in the galaxy. Every government, every corporation, every desperate family with a plague-stricken loved one will want you. What does that mean for me? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. It means your simple life is over, Princess Zephyr said with sympathy. But, it also means you have the power to save our entire civilization. The question is, what do you want to do with that power? Jake looked around the room at the worried faces of the station crew, at the hopeful expressions of Duke Aldrich and his daughter, at the medical readings that showed a miracle he still couldn't understand. Through the viewport, he could see the growing fleet of ships, each one representing someone who wanted something from him. I want to help, he said finally. I've spent my whole life fixing things. If I can fix this plague, then, that's what I should do. Princess Zephyra smiled. I hoped you'd say that. But, I should warn you, the path ahead won't be simple. There are those who would use you, others who would fear you, and some who would see you destroyed rather than allow your abilities to change the balance of power in the galaxy. Are you one of them? Jake asked directly. The princess met his gaze without flinching. I owe you my life. Whatever comes next, you have my loyalty and my protection. But, I'm just one dragon, and the forces gathering around you are vast. Through the viewport, Jake watched as another massive ship dropped out of hyperspace, this one bearing the insignia of the Centauri Trade Federation. Soon, there would be representatives from every major power in the galaxy, all wanting to claim him, control him, or use his abilities for their own ends. Then, I guess we'd better figure out how to stay ahead of them, he said. Princess Zephyra's smile turned fierce, showing just a hint of the ancient predator that lived within all dragons. Now you're thinking like someone who might actually survive what's coming. But, even as she spoke, neither of them noticed the small device that had been quietly recording every word from its hiding place beneath the medical scanner. Nor did they see the shadowy figure in the ventilation shaft above, gathering intelligence for parties unknown. The healing of Princess Zephyra had indeed changed everything. But, as Jake was about to learn, miracles attracted attention from forces far darker than desperate governments or greedy corporations. In the deep reaches of space, ancient powers that had slumbered for millennia were beginning to stir, drawn by the emergence of abilities that should not exist in this modern age. The real game was only just beginning. The attack came at 0347 station time, just as Jake was finally managing to fall asleep. The first indication something was wrong was when the lights cut out. Emergency illumination kicked in a moment later, bathing Echo 7's corridors in airy red light as klaxons wailed their urgent warning. Jake rolled out of his bunk, muscle memory from his military days taking over as he grabbed his emergency kit and headed for the door. All personnel to emergency stations, Commander Martinez's voice echoed through the station. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. This is not a drill. Jake's quarters were in the residential section, 3 levels down from the medical bay where Princess Zephyra was recovering. As he made his way through corridors filled with confused station personnel, he could feel the deep vibrations that meant weapons fire was impacting the station's shields. He reached the medical bay to find it in chaos. Duke Aldrich stood guard over his daughter's bed, his ceremonial sword drawn and gleaming with an inner fire that spoke of ancient draconic metallurgy. Dr. Park was frantically transferring medical data to portable storage units while Captain Thuras monitored his communication equipment with the practiced calm of a veteran warrior. Jake! Princess Zephyra called out as soon as she saw him. She was out of bed, moving with the fluid grace of a healthy dragon despite having been near death only hours before. Thank the ancestors you're safe. What's happening? Jake demanded. Captain Thuras looked up from his scanner. 6 ships dropped out of hyperspace without warning. No identification, no response to hails. They've jammed our communications and begun attacking the orbital defense platforms. Through the viewport, Jake could see flashes of energy weapons and the brief, brilliant flares that marked the destruction of Echo 7's modest defenses. But something else caught his attention. The ships attacking them weren't like anything he'd seen before. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls appeared to shift and flow like liquid metal, and their weapon signatures were unlike anything in his experience. Those aren't human ships, he said. Or draconic, or Centauri. Duke Aldrich nodded grimly. Void runners. The shadow dwellers who prey on the edges of civilized space. They deal in information, assassination, and slavery, anything that brings profit without regard for law or honor. Why would they attack us? Because, Princess Zephyra said quietly, word of your abilities has reached the wrong ears. There are powers in the galaxy who would see our empire fall rather than be saved. And, there are others who would claim your gift for themselves. The station shuddered as something massive impacted the hull. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing off damaged sections, and Jake could hear the hiss of atmosphere escaping through compromised seals. We need to evacuate, Dr. Park said urgently. The station won't survive much more of this. To where? Jake asked. Those ships out there will blow any escape pod out of space before we clear the docking bay. Captain Thuras held up a hand for silence, pressing his communication device closer to his ear. Wait. I'm receiving a transmission on a secure military frequency. His eyes widened. It's Admiral Pyraxis aboard the Imperial Dreadnought Flame of Justice. He's engaged the attackers. Through the viewport, Jake saw the most magnificent sight of his life. A draconic dreadnought was emerging from hyperspace, 3 kilometers of living metal shaped like a colossal dragon, its hull gleaming with scales that reflected starlight in rainbow patterns. Weapon ports along its flanks opened like breathing vents, and streams of coherent plasma erupted toward the attacking vessels. The battle was brief but spectacular. The Void Runner ships were fast and deadly, but they were vastly outgunned by the Imperial Dreadnought. Within minutes, 4 of the attacking vessels were drifting hulks, and the remaining 2 were fleeing into hyperspace. Frontier Station Echo 7, Admiral Pyraxis's voice boomed over the communication system. This is Imperial Dreadnought Flame of Justice. Prepare to receive boarding party. 30 minutes later, Jake found himself in the presence of the most intimidating dragon he'd ever seen. Admiral Pyraxis stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scales the deep red of molten iron, his eyes like chips of golden flame. Ancient battle scars marked his hide, and his presence filled the room with an aura of barely contained violence. Jake Thompson, the Admiral said, his voice carrying harmonics that made Jake's bones vibrate, you have caused quite a stir in certain circles. I didn't mean to cause any trouble, Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Trouble? Admiral Pyraxis laughed, a sound like controlled explosions. Human, you have single-handedly given our empire hope for the first time in a century. That kind of miracle creates ripples across the galaxy. Duke Aldrich stepped forward. Admiral, the attack confirms our worst fears. There are already forces moving against Jake, seeking to eliminate or capture him. Indeed, Pyraxis nodded. Our intelligence services report that bounties have been placed on Jake Thompson by at least 6 different organizations. Some want him alive for study, others prefer him dead to prevent any advantage to the Draconic Empire. Jake felt his stomach drop. How much? 50 million credits for capture, 20 million for confirmed death, the Admiral replied matter-of-factly. Congratulations, human. You're now one of the most valuable targets in the galaxy. Princess Zephyra moved to stand beside Jake, her presence somehow reassuring despite the overwhelming situation. He needs protection. He needs more than protection, Admiral Pyraxis said. He needs to be somewhere we can study his abilities and determine their full extent. The Emperor has commanded that Jake Thompson be brought to Dracarys Prime immediately. Jake shook his head. I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening to me. And, I'm not leaving these people vulnerable. He gestured to Dr. Park and the other station personnel. Admiral Pyraxis studied him for a long moment. You would refuse a direct command from the Emperor of the Draconic Empire? I would respectfully decline an invitation, Jake corrected. I'm not a citizen of your empire. I'm a human being who stumbled into something he doesn't understand, and I'm not going to be anyone's prisoner or guinea pig. The Admiral's eyes blazed, and Jake was certain he was about to become a small pile of ash. But Princess Zephyra stepped between them. Admiral, with respect, Jake Thompson has already proven his good intentions by healing me when he had nothing to gain from doing so. Perhaps a different approach would be more effective. What do you suggest, Princess? Make him a partner, not a prisoner. Offer him resources to understand his abilities, protection for those he cares about, and the freedom to make his own choices. appeal to his desire to help rather than commanding his obedience. Admiral Pyraxis looked between the princess and Jake for a long moment. Your diplomatic skills have improved since the academy, princess. Very well. He turned to Jake. Jake Thompson, the Draconic Empire formally requests your assistance in finding a cure for the plague that threatens our people. In exchange, we offer our protection, access to our scientific resources, and a partnership in determining how best to use your abilities. And if I refuse? Then, you remain free to make your own choices, the Admiral said, though his tone suggested he thought those choices would be limited and dangerous. But, I should point out that you've already demonstrated the ability to heal Princess Zephyra. There are millions of dragons dying from this plague, including children. Can you honestly turn your back on them? Jake closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. In the space of 24 hours, he'd gone from obscure mechanic to galactic celebrity to target of assassination attempts. And, now he was being asked to help save an entire civilization. If I agree, he said finally, I have conditions. Admiral Pyraxis raised an eyebrow ridge. Name them. First, the people on this station get full Imperial protection. They're involved now because of me, and I won't see them suffer for it. Second, I want access to all your medical research on the plague, no classified information, no hidden agendas. Third, I work as a partner, not a subject. No experiments on me without my consent. Agreed, the Admiral said without hesitation. Jake looked at Princess Zephyra, who nodded encouragingly. Then, he looked at Dr. Park, who was watching him with a mixture of admiration and concern. I want Dr. Park to come with us, Jake added. If we're going to understand what I can do, I want someone I trust involved in the research. Dr. Park's eyes widened. Jake, I'm honored, but I'm not equipped for this kind of work. You're the only doctor who's studied both me and the princess, Jake pointed out. And you're the only one I know isn't working for someone else's agenda. Admiral Pyraxis nodded. The good doctor is welcome aboard the Flame of Justice. We have medical facilities that will make her current equipment seem like primitive tools. Then, I guess I'm in, Jake said, trying to project more confidence than he felt. Excellent, Admiral Pyraxis smiled, revealing teeth like crystalline daggers. We'll transfer you to the Dreadnought within the hour. Princess, Duke Aldrich, I assume you'll be accompanying us? Wouldn't miss it, Princess Zephyra replied, but Jake caught the worried look she exchanged with her father. As the group began making preparations for transfer, Jake pulled the princess aside. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that changes what you need to do, she replied. But, Jake, you should know that not everyone in the Empire supports bringing humans into our affairs. There will be those who see you as a threat to traditional dragon supremacy. And, you? Princess Zephyra met his eyes steadily. I see you as the person who saved my life when no one else could. Whatever comes next, you have my trust and my protection. Even against your own people? Especially against my own people, if necessary, she said firmly. Jake, you're about to enter a world of politics and intrigue unlike anything you've experienced. The Imperial Court on Dracaris Prime makes the military look simple and straightforward. But, remember this, you have something they need, which means you have power. Don't let them make you forget that. An hour later, Jake found himself aboard the most advanced warship in the galaxy, surrounded by dragons who viewed him with mixtures of hope, suspicion, and calculation. As the Flame of Justice entered hyperspace, leaving Frontier Station Echo 7 under the protection of a squadron of Imperial cruisers, Jake stared out at the swirling tunnel of twisted spacetime and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. What he didn't know was that their departure had been monitored by eyes that never slept. In the deepest reaches of the ship's computer systems, a dormant program awakened and began transmitting data to coordinates far beyond Imperial space. The Void Runners had failed to capture or kill Jake Thompson, but they had succeeded in one crucial objective. They now knew exactly where he was going and who was protecting him. And, in the shadows between stars, ancient powers were beginning to move, drawn by the emergence of abilities that threatened the careful balance they had maintained for millennia. The real game was about to begin, and Jake Thompson, former mechanic, accidental healer, and now the most wanted man in the galaxy, was walking directly into the heart of it. Dracoris Prime was beautiful in a way that defied human comprehension. As the flame of justice dropped out of hyperspace near the heart of the Draconic Empire, Jake pressed his face to the observation deck's viewport and struggled to process what he was seeing. The planet below was a jewel of crystalline spires and flowing organic architecture, its continents shaped like sleeping dragons and its oceans shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with some planetary heartbeat. Massive orbital platforms ringed the world like metallic dragons in flight, their hulls alive with the same living metal technology that characterized all draconic construction. Ships moved between them in graceful formations, their paths weaving patterns that looked random to human eyes but spoke of an underlying harmony that Jake was only beginning to understand. "Impressive, isn't it?" Princess Zephyra said, joining him at the viewport. Her recovery was complete now, her scales gleaming with health and vitality that made her seem to glow with inner fire. "It's incredible," Jake admitted. "I've seen holos of Imperial worlds, but this..." He gestured helplessly at the vista before them. "This is the culmination of 10,000 years of civilization," she said with obvious pride. "My people have worked for centuries to create harmony between technology and nature, between individual desire and collective good. What you see is the physical manifestation of our philosophy. And I'm about to walk into the middle of it as the alien who might save your species," Jake said wryly. "Yes," Princess Zephyra replied simply. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified would be more accurate." She laughed, the sound like silver bells in the wind. "Good. That means you understand the magnitude of what's happening." Dr. Park joined them at the viewport, her eyes wide with wonder. "Jake, the medical facilities on this ship are beyond anything in human space. The scanners can detect quantum fluctuations in individual cells. If we're going to understand your abilities, this is the place to do it. Any progress on the tests?" "Some, Dr. Park replied, consulting her datapad. "Your bioelectric field definitely shows anomalous patterns when you're focusing on healing, but I still can't identify the source. It's as if your nervous system is somehow interfacing with quantum fields in ways that shouldn't be possible." Admiral Pyraxis approached their group, his massive form moving with the fluid grace of a predator. "Jake Thompson will be docking at Imperial Medical Complex 7 within the hour. The Emperor's personal physicians are waiting to begin a full analysis of your abilities." "And the Emperor?" "Will meet with you once the initial studies are complete. His Majesty is curious about the human who can heal dragons." Jake caught the careful tone in the Admiral's voice. "But not everyone is happy about this, are they?" "The Imperial Court is never simple," Admiral Pyraxis admitted. "There are factions that see your emergence as a threat to the natural order. Dragons have ruled the galaxy for millennia through our inherent superiority, our strength, our fire, our resistance to disease and aging. The idea that an alien, particularly a human, might possess abilities we lack is troubling to some." "What kind of troubling?" Princess Zephyra exchanged a look with her guardian. "The kind that might lead to accidents or misunderstandings that could eliminate the problem while maintaining plausible deniability." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Great. So I'm walking into a nest of space dragons who might want me dead for political reasons." "Not all of us," Princess Zephyra said firmly. "You have allies in the Imperial family, and your abilities make you too valuable to simply eliminate. But, Jake, you need to understand the court operates on levels of subtlety and misdirection that make human politics look straightforward. Every word, every gesture, every alliance carries meanings within meanings." "Any advice?" "Be yourself," she said. "Don't try to play games you don't understand. Your honesty and directness are actually advantages in an environment where everyone assumes multiple layers of deception." 2 hours later, Jake found himself in the most advanced medical facility he'd ever imagined. Imperial Medical Complex 7 was built into a crystalline spire that rose from the planetary surface like a frozen flame, its walls alive with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in harmony with the planet's own rhythms. The head physician, an ancient dragon named Healer Vorthak, reminded Jake uncomfortably of a friendly snake. His scales were the pale green of old copper, and his movements carried the deliberate precision of someone accustomed to working at the cellular level. Fascinating, Healer Vorthak murmured as he studied the readings from Jake's latest scan. Absolutely fascinating. Your neural patterns show quantum entanglement signatures that shouldn't exist in biological systems. Is that good or bad? Jake asked from the medical platform where he'd been poked, prodded, and scanned for the past 3 hours. It's unprecedented, the healer replied. Dr. Park, your preliminary observations were correct. This human's nervous system appears to interface directly with quantum field fluctuations. But, the mechanism. He gestured helplessly with one clawed hand. It defies our understanding of biology. Dr. Park leaned over the display showing Jake's brain activity. Could it be some kind of evolutionary adaptation? Humans did evolve on a world with higher background radiation than most inhabited planets. Perhaps, Healer Vorthak mused. But, this level of quantum sensitivity would normally be lethal. The neural pathways should burn out from the feedback. Yet his brain tissue shows no signs of damage, quite the opposite, actually. His neural density is significantly above human baseline. In other words, Princess Zephyra said from her observation post, Jake is evolving in real time. That's one hypothesis, the healer agreed. Another possibility is that this ability was always present in human genetics but required some specific trigger to manifest. Like what? Jake asked. Exposure to dragon bioresonance fields, perhaps. Or extreme emotional states. Or simply the right combination of circumstances. Healer Vorthak paused his examination. Jake Thompson, would you be willing to attempt healing another patient? Under controlled conditions, of course. Jake sat up on the medical platform. You have someone with the scale rot? Unfortunately, yes. A young dragon named Kareth, only 50 years old. The plague took him yesterday, and his family has requested that he be allowed to participate in any experimental treatments. Jake nodded. I'll try. 20 minutes later, Jake stood beside another medical platform where a dragon barely out of adolescence lay unconscious. Kareth's scales had once been the bright silver of polished steel, but the Grey Death had consumed nearly 3/4 of his body. His breathing was shallow and irregular, and Jake could see the same wrongness he'd sensed in Princess Zephyra, a discordant frequency that spoke of systems failing at the most fundamental level. Remember, Dr. Park said softly, we're monitoring everything. Try to be aware of what you're feeling as you work. Jake placed his hands on Kareth's chest and closed his eyes, reaching for that same intuitive understanding that had guided him with the princess. The dragon's life force felt weak and chaotic, like an engine with damaged timing. But, underneath the discord, Jake could sense the proper pattern, the harmonic frequency that represented healthy dragon physiology. He began to hum, letting the sound resonate through his chest and into his hands. Almost immediately, he felt the familiar sensation of connection, as if he were interfacing with a complex system and gradually tuning it back to optimal function. The Grey Death began to retreat. Remarkable, Healer Vorthak whispered, watching the readings on his instruments. The cellular decay is not merely stopping, it's reversing. Damaged tissue is regenerating at an accelerated rate. Jake continued his work, following instincts he couldn't explain. It was like conducting an orchestra of biological systems, helping each component find its proper place in the greater symphony of life. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he opened his eyes to find Kareth's scales shining with healthy silver light. The young dragon's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Jake with wonder. You brought me back. How do you feel? Dr. Park asked, running her medical scanner over the patient. Strong, Kareth replied, sitting up with ease. Better than I've felt since the plague took me. It's as if I was drowning and, suddenly, found myself breathing again. Healer Vorthak was studying his instruments with an expression of disbelief. Complete cellular regeneration. The plague markers have been eliminated entirely. This is... He looked at Jake with something approaching reverence. This is miraculous. But, before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the medical complex. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red illumination as a voice boomed over the facility's communication system. Security alert. Unauthorized access detected in Medical Complex 7. All personnel implement lockdown protocols immediately. Admiral Pyraxis appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Jake, Princess, we have a problem. Someone has breached Imperial security specifically to reach this facility. Who? Princess Zephyra demanded. Unknown. But, whoever they are, they're using technology that shouldn't exist. Our sensors can barely track them, and they've disabled security systems that were thought to be impregnable. Jake felt his heart racing. Are we under attack again? Possibly. But, this feels different from the Void Runner assault. This is more surgical. Whoever is coming, they want something specific. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's main door dissolved, not opened, not destroyed, but simply ceased to exist, leaving behind an opening through solid matter that made Jake's eyes water to look at. Through that impossible doorway stepped a figure that shouldn't have been there. It appeared to be human, but Jake's mechanic instincts screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. The stranger moved with fluid grace that seemed to ignore momentum and inertia, and his eyes held depths that suggested consciousness far beyond normal human parameters. Jake Thompson, the figure said, his voice carrying harmonics that reminded Jake uncomfortably of dragon speech patterns. I've been looking for you. Admiral Pyraxis stepped forward, plasma rifle materializing in his hands. Identify yourself. How did you breach Imperial security? The stranger smiled, ignoring the weapon pointed at him. I am called Nexus. As for how I'm here, I walk between possibilities, Admiral. Your security systems are quite impressive for this level of reality. This level of reality? Dr. Park whispered. What does that mean? Nexus turned his attention to her, and Jake saw her step backward involuntarily. It means, Doctor, that your patient represents something far more significant than a simple healing ability. Jake Thompson has touched the fundamental forces that bind the universe together, forces that were deliberately hidden long ago for very good reasons. Princess Zephyra moved to stand beside Jake. What do you want with him? I want to prevent a war that will consume the galaxy, Nexus replied simply. Jake's abilities are not unique to him, they represent the return of something ancient, something that powerful beings spent eons ensuring would remain dormant. His emergence signals that the barriers are weakening. What barriers? Jake asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Nexus studied him with eyes that seemed to see through multiple dimensions. The barriers that separate this reality from the realm of the architects, Jake. The beings who shaped the fundamental forces of existence itself. They've been sleeping for millions of years, but your use of their power is beginning to wake them. That's impossible, Healer Vorthak said. The architects are myth. Stories told to explain things our ancestors couldn't understand. Are they? Nexus asked. Then, how do you explain Jake's abilities? How do you explain technology that can dissolve matter at the quantum level? How do you explain my ability to find him across the galaxy despite every attempt to hide his location? Jake felt the weight of impossible revelations settling on his shoulders. You're saying I'm accidentally waking up ancient gods? I'm saying that your healing abilities are just the beginning, Nexus replied. Every time you use that power, you create ripples in the quantum foam that underlies reality. Those ripples are being noticed by things that should remain sleeping. Admiral Pyraxis kept his weapon trained on the stranger. Even if what you're saying is true, what do you expect us to do about it? Teach him control, Nexus said simply. Help him understand what he's actually doing before he accidentally triggers something that ends civilization as we know it. Princess Zephyra stepped forward. And, why should we trust you? Nexus smiled sadly. Because I'm the last of my kind, Princess. The last guardian of knowledge that should have died with the civilization that created it. And, because Jake Thompson is going to need allies when the real powers in the galaxy realize what he represents. Which is the return of magic to a universe that has forgotten how to believe in it. Outside the medical complex, reality twisted as observation vessels from a dozen civilizations tried to understand what they were witnessing. And, in the spaces between dimensions, ancient intelligences stirred in their eternal sleep, drawn by the scent of power they had thought safely buried beneath the weight of ages. Jake Thompson, former mechanic and accidental healer, stood at the center of forces he was only beginning to understand. And the choices he made in the next few hours would determine whether the galaxy faced a new golden age or its final twilight. The Emperor of the Draconic Empire was dying. Jake could see it the moment he was escorted into the vast Imperial throne room, despite the careful attempts to hide the truth. Emperor Scorvanus Rex, master of 73 worlds and Lord of the Flame Eternal, was a shadow of the mighty dragon he had once been. The plague had consumed nearly half his magnificent golden scales, leaving patches of grey death that spread visibly even as Jake watched. The throne room itself was a marvel of draconic architecture, a crystalline cathedral that stretched upward for hundreds of meters, its walls alive with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the emperor's labored breathing. Courtiers and nobles filled the space, their own bodies bearing the marks of the plague that was slowly killing their entire civilization. Jake Thompson, the emperor said, his voice still carrying the harmonic undertones of dragon nobility despite his weakness, you stand before the imperial court as the human who has accomplished what our greatest healers could not, the reversal of the Grey Death. Jake inclined his head respectfully, very aware that hundreds of dragon eyes were watching his every movement. Princess Zephyra stood beside him, her presence both comforting and reminder of what was at stake. Dr. Park flanked his other side, her medical scanner discreetly recording everything for later analysis. Your Majesty, Jake replied, I'm honored by your invitation, but I still don't fully understand what I've done or how I did it. A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled courtiers. Several dragons exchanged meaningful glances, and Jake caught the subtle signs of political maneuvering that Princess Zephyra had warned him about. Chancellor Dracos stepped forward, his ancient form moving with careful dignity. Your Majesty, the human's abilities have been verified by our most skilled healers. He has successfully restored health to both Princess Zephyra and the young Kareth. However, questions remain about the nature of these abilities and their potential implications. What the Chancellor means, interrupted Duke Vextar from his position among the war faction nobles, is that we are placing our empire's hope in the hands of an alien whose powers may come from unknown and potentially dangerous sources. Jake felt the tension in the room ratchet upward. Duke Vextar was massive even by dragon standards, his black scales marked with the scars of a dozen battles. His followers represented the old guard, dragons who believed in their species' inherent superiority and viewed human involvement as weakness. Duke Vextar raises valid concerns, Emperor Scorvanus said diplomatically. Jake Thompson, our medical analysis suggests your abilities operate through quantum field manipulation at the cellular level. Can you explain how you learned to do this? I didn't learn it, Your Majesty. It just happened. When I touched Princess Zephyra, I felt something wrong with her life force, like a machine that was out of tune. I tried to help her find her proper frequency, and the healing just occurred. Convenient, Duke Vextar said with barely concealed disdain. An untrained human stumbles across abilities that our civilization's greatest minds cannot comprehend or duplicate. Perhaps we should question whether these powers come from a source friendly to our empire. Before Jake could respond, the impossible happened again. Reality twisted near the throne room's main entrance, and Nexus materialized as if he had always been standing there. The assembled court erupted in shouts of alarm as guards moved to defend the emperor, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the mysterious figure. Your Majesty, Nexus said, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber, I apologize for the intrusion, but events are moving faster than anticipated. Jake Thompson needs to understand what he truly is before it's too late. Emperor Scorvanus studied the apparition with surprising calm. You are the being who breached our medical complex. Our analysts concluded you shouldn't exist according to known physics. Your analysts are correct, Nexus replied. I exist in the spaces between dimensions, maintaining watch over knowledge that was meant to stay buried. But Jake's emergence has changed everything. Duke Vextar stepped forward, his form radiating hostility. Another convenient arrival. First a human with impossible abilities, now a dimensional phantom with warnings of doom. How much of this are we expected to believe? Believe what you choose, Nexus said, his attention focused on Jake. But the universe is about to demonstrate the truth regardless. Jake, every time you use your healing abilities, you create quantum resonance patterns that echo across dimensional boundaries. Those echoes are being heard. By whom? Jake asked, though he suspected the answer would terrify him. The architects. The beings who shape the fundamental forces that govern reality itself. They've been sleeping for millions of years, but your power is waking them. The throne room fell silent except for the Emperor's labored breathing. Even Duke Vextar seemed speechless at the implications. Assuming this is true, Emperor Scorvanus said carefully, what does their awakening mean for our galaxy? Nexus turned to address the entire court. The architects view reality as their creation to shape as they will. They have no concept of lesser beings having rights or autonomy. When they wake fully, they will remake everything according to their vision, which does not include current galactic civilization. Princess Zephyra stepped forward. Then, Jake must stop using his abilities. Impossible, Dr. Park interjected, consulting her scanner. The quantum patterns are already established. Jake's healing has created a resonance cascade that's self-sustaining. Even if he never healed another person, the process would continue. How long do we have? The Emperor asked. Months, Nexus replied. Perhaps less. The barriers between dimensions are weakening with each passing day. Soon, the first architect scouts will begin manifesting in this reality. Duke Vextar slammed his massive fist on the ground, cracking the crystalline floor. Enough! Even if this madness is true, we are the Draconic Empire. We have ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia. If these architects want our reality, let them try to take it. You cannot fight them with conventional weapons, Nexus said sadly. Their technology operates on principles that your physics cannot explain. They reshape matter by will alone, command forces that dwarf your most powerful weapons. Then, what do you suggest? Emperor Scorvanus asked. Nexus turned back to Jake. The same power that will draw the architects here is the only thing that can oppose them. Jake's abilities aren't just healing, they're reality manipulation at its most fundamental level. He's unconsciously accessing the same forces the architects use. Jake felt his knees weaken. You're saying I have to fight godlike beings with powers I don't understand? I'm saying you need to learn to understand them very quickly, Nexus replied. And, you'll need allies, not just dragons, but representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The architects won't distinguish between species when they remake reality. Chancellor Dracos cleared his throat. The practical difficulties of such an alliance would be enormous. Many species have territorial disputes with our empire. They would never trust us enough to cooperate. They will when the alternative becomes clear, Princess Zephyra said firmly. But, Jake is right, he needs training. If his powers can potentially save the galaxy, we need to help him master them. Emperor Scorvanus attempted to rise from his throne, his massive form trembling with effort. Jake Thompson, on behalf of the Draconic Empire, I formally request your assistance in protecting our reality from this threat. In return, we pledge our empire's full resources to training you and gathering the alliances necessary for success. Jake looked around the throne room at the assembled dragons, their faces reflecting fear, hope, and desperation in equal measure. Then, he looked at Princess Zephyra, whose golden eyes conveyed absolute faith in his abilities. Your Majesty, Jake said, before I answer, I need to know something. Are you willing to work as equals with other species? Because if we're going to build the kind of alliance this requires, the dragons can't be the dominant power. Everyone has to have an equal voice. Duke Vextar snarled. Impossible. We have ruled the galaxy through strength and superiority for 10,000 years, Jake interrupted. And, in that time, you've developed a plague that's killing your entire species. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. The throne room erupted in angry voices from the war faction, but Emperor Scorvanus raised one massive claw for silence. Jake Thompson speaks truth, however, unpalatable. Our traditional methods have failed us when we needed them most. If cooperation with lesser species is the price of survival, then we will adapt. Then, I accept, Jake said. But, I have conditions. Dr. Park leads the scientific research into my abilities with full access to Imperial resources. Princess Zephyra serves as liaison between the human and dragon communities. And Nexus helps train me to control powers I don't understand. Nexus nodded. I had hoped you would ask that. But, Jake, you should know mastering architect abilities will change you. Each time you consciously access that level of power, you become less purely human. What's the alternative? Jake asked. Extinction, Nexus replied simply. For every sapient species in the galaxy. Emperor Scorvanus struggled to his feet, his remaining golden scales gleaming with determination. Then, we face the future together. Jake Thompson, by the ancient authority of the Draconic Empire, I name you Healer Champion of the Alliance. Princess Zephyra, you will serve as his shield companion and guide. Dr. Park, you are granted access to all Imperial scientific resources. And, to the being called Nexus, you are welcome in our realm as long as you aid in humanity's defense. As the Emperor spoke, Jake felt something shift within him, not just responsibility, but actual power. The quantum patterns that Dr. Park's scanners had detected seemed to strengthen and stabilize, as if the formal acceptance of his role had somehow anchored his abilities. There's something else, Princess Zephyra said quietly. The healing of our people, it needs to continue. Every healthy dragon we can restore makes our alliance stronger. Jake nodded. Then, we'd better get started. How many dragons are infected galaxy-wide? Approximately 40 million, Chancellor Dracos replied. Jake stared at him. 40 million? The plague has been spreading for over a century, the Chancellor explained. It affects every dragon world, every ship, every colony. I can't possibly heal 40 million individuals one at a time, Jake said, feeling overwhelmed. Nexus smiled for the first time since appearing. No, but you won't have to. Once you learn to consciously control architect abilities, you'll be able to work on a much larger scale. Planetary healing, perhaps even system-wide effects. That's possible? The architects reshaped entire star clusters according to their desires. Healing a plague across multiple worlds would be relatively simple for someone who truly understands the underlying forces. As if responding to their conversation, space around Dracarys Prime suddenly filled with ships. Vessels from the Human Colonial Authority, the Centauri Trade Federation, the Altarian Republic, and a dozen other civilizations dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously. Emergency signals flooded Imperial communication networks as captain after captain requested permission to approach the homeworld. Admiral Pyraxis appeared in the throne room, moving quickly despite his massive size. Your Majesty, we have over 200 vessels requesting emergency docking. Every major power in the galaxy seems to have sent delegations. And the sensor readings. He paused, studying his data pad. The quantum disturbances around this system are unlike anything we've ever recorded. Through the massive viewports of the throne room, Jake could see strange lights flickering in the space between stars, not ships or natural phenomena, but something that seemed to exist partially in this reality and partially elsewhere. The dimensional barriers are weakening faster than predicted, Nexus said grimly. The Architect's scouts are beginning to probe this reality. We have weeks, not months. Emperor Scorvanus looked at Jake with an expression that mixed desperation and hope. Healer Champion, it appears your training must begin immediately. Jake Thompson, former frontier mechanic turned galactic savior, looked out at the strange lights dancing between dimensions and felt the weight of an entire galaxy's survival settle on his shoulders. But, when he glanced at Princess Zephyra standing beside him, her scales gleaming with the health he had restored, he found the courage to nod. Then, let's save the galaxy, he said. As if responding to his words, the strange lights in space pulsed brighter, and Jake felt answering power stir within him, ancient, vast, and barely controlled. The real battle was about to begin, but, for the first time since this all started, he began to believe they might actually have a chance. In the depths of space, dimensional scouts from a civilization older than stars took note of the quantum signature emanating from a small blue-scaled dragon princess and the human whose touch had healed her. Ancient intelligences began to stir more urgently from their million-year slumber, drawn by the scent of power they had thought safely buried beneath the weight of ages. But they would find that this galaxy was no longer the helpless collection of primitive species they remembered. Evolution had produced something new, a human mechanic who could touch the fundamental forces of creation itself, allied with a dragon empire willing to sacrifice its pride for survival. The war for reality itself was about to begin, and both sides would discover that the universe still held surprises that could change everything.